There are some challenges going into this game with Oregon State in the game formerly known as the Civil War. A couple come from Oregon's side, but Oregon State, they've got a lot of good things that the Ducks will have to be ready for. Here we go.
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Yes, it is that time once again for Locked On Ducks. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day if you're watching on YouTube. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your number one source to stay up to date with the Ducks. Please continue to like, comment, subscribe if you haven't already, wherever you listen to or watch this show. We're coming up on 1,600 YouTube subscribers, hundreds more on podcasts, and I'm eternally grateful to all of you for supporting the show, which today is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs, helping you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. That may not be the last time I stumble on today's show. I'm going on about 4.5 hours sleep coming back from Eugene. It was an early plane, so hopefully my brain has enough to stay competent here. But wanted to, as I have on many occasions on this Wednesday edition of the show, kind of give you an idea, if you haven't watched Oregon State this year, of kind of what the Beavs are, what their strengths are, and kind of the challenges that Oregon will have to overcome. And make no mistake about it, Oregon State is a good football team. Oregon State is a good football team. I don't know if it makes me unpopular with some of you to hear me say that, but that's just the reality. I've watched the Beavs a lot this year. I was high on them coming into the year. I thought they'd end the season 8-4. Look like, at least I hope, they're going to end the regular season at 8-4. They are a good, solid football team. But the questions for Oregon going into this game, and the challenges, I think, start on the Oregon side of the ball, most notably with the injury to Bo Nix. Now, he says he's good to go. He says he feels better than he did at this time last week, which is encouraging. But after what we saw on Saturday, and given that he, played in an entire football game, took a couple hits here and there, was running around on it and such, even if it's better than last week, the ankle injury, it's really hard to envision a world, though I would love to see it, where Bo Nix is back to what he was for the entirety of the Washington game or every other game this season, where he's fully healthy, running around, extending plays, quarterback runs are a part of the offense. And I think that presents a really unique challenge for the Ducks. And we saw it a little bit against Utah, their worst rushing game of the year. They were at like 2.5 yards per carry. And that's because this is an offense that has been explosive. They've been versatile. They have been multiple. But one thing that they've had as a feature of their offense all season long is the quarterback run. And when you take that away and you're continuing to run concepts that are at least primarily, or at least somewhat, I should say, predicated on the quarterback run being a threat, when you take that away and you're still running those same concepts, they're not as effective. I think we saw that against Utah. And the Utes are a good defensive team, but so is Oregon State, and they'll be able to take advantage of it if Oregon isn't able to do something better. Now, one area that could perhaps provide a glimmer of hope on that front, if Bo Nix isn't able to run well, is if Alex Forsyth is able to come back. Now, a center is a lot like a kicker. Until he's not there or not performing up to the standard, think Alamo Bowl 2015, you don't always fully appreciate everything that he does or how important he is to what your football team wants to do to win a game. Alex Forsyth did not play against Utah. He did play against Washington, but when he was out against the Utes last week, one thing that I noticed with Oregon's offensive line play, it was still overall quite good, particularly in pass protection. They had a couple moments that were a little iffy. Big Sala got manhandled a couple times. TJ Bass let a guy get by him a time or two, but that sort of stuff is going to happen against a good defensive team like the Utes. Oregon State's defensive front is not going to present the same challenge, but they've done some nice things this year. I'll talk about that a little later in the show. But I think having Forsyth back could really help the running game tremendously, not just because of what he does as a blocker, because you slide Ryan Walk over to that center position. In terms of moving defensive linemen around, winning 1v1s, holding up in pass protection, is there a big gap between Forsyth and Ryan Walk? No. Is there a gap? Yeah. Like Forsyth is a little bit better, but it's not the Grand Canyon here. Both are really, really good all conference caliber offensive linemen. Forsyth is in his 6th year. I think the biggest thing the Ducks are missing when Alex Forsyth isn't there is the communication, the calls, and just kind of the continuity and togetherness, because the center is the guy who tells everybody where to go, gets them where to be, and has them in that sort of mindset. And I think there's a comfort element there that applies to the offensive line as much as any unit on the field on either side of the ball. I mean, I think the offensive line and the secondary, more than any other position group, it's all about chemistry. You have to be so cohesive as a unit, and any sort of communication or assignment breakdown can lead to a disastrous play. It can lead to a busted coverage and a big touchdown, or it can lead to a free runner at the quarterback or your running back never having a chance to get going. So if they could get him back, I think that would give me some more confidence about the running game. But I do think there's a challenge here for Kenny Dillingham and this Oregon offensive line, because when you're trying to run the football and present the quarterback as a threat as a part of your scheme, but then he's not, I wonder if they aren't putting in some run plays, concepts, or packages this week that are not dependent on the quarterback running the ball. They tried the Wildcat last week. That was clearly something they went for. Yeah, that didn't work. They had a false start, and they had a negative 6-yard run. And it's just a little bit too predictable. And when Bo Nix motions out, nobody ran with him, so it didn't actually take a defender out of the box the way that you would like it to. So I don't think that's the solution, to just motion Bo out and go Wildcat from time to time. It's not something they've done this year, and clearly not something they're ready to employ with a high rate of success. I wonder if we'll see a little bit more 14J this week against Oregon State, because that's a formation where basically everybody knows you're going to line up and run the football, but you're able to do it anyway. But there isn't really a threat of the quarterback, pulling out. It's not like we're running a Georgia Tech style or one of the service academies triple option offenses out of that look. It's just line up and run power football. I'd expect to see that a little bit more, assuming Bo isn't back at full strength, which I don't think he will be. But I wonder if they'll add any new wrinkles at practice. Will they, put in, like, think back to Chip's offense in 2009. Everything was from the shotgun, right? But then after they played Oregon State, actually, and the Beavs were killing us. Of course, we won the game, but the Beavs were killing us with that fly sweep action with James and Jaquiz Rogers. Those were a good couple of football players. Oregon then put that into their offense and showed it in the Rose Bowl, and showed it a little bit in the ensuing years. Not quite as much, but that was something that was just kind of an install and just kind of popped up every now and then. I wonder if you won't see something like that, where to keep the defense off balance, you're utilizing jet motion, a lot like what Oregon State presently does with their offense, what Utah does with their offense as well, rather than the threat of the quarterback keeping it being the thing that kind of makes the defense freeze or can get guys out of position or moving this way when you're actually running that way and such. So I'm curious to see if anything like that happens, but if they don't want to put in a new formation, then I expect to see more 14J, especially in short yardage situations. Hopefully they don't try and get super cute. Just stick to the simple stuff. An occasional tight end jet sweep in the red zone, that's fine. But how many times has just that quick little pin and pull power play been stopped for negative yards? Yeah, not very often. How many times do you go to LinkedIn looking for a qualified candidate and not find what you're looking for? Yeah, again, not very often. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain you have access to the best qualified candidates available. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. Really easy to create a free job post on there. Then go add the purple hashtag hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you're hiring. Small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs numero uno in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. A great price. Terms and conditions do apply. Okay, so I think that's what questions and challenges Oregon's got offensively going into this game. Let's get to the Beavs now and what Oregon State brings on primarily the defensive side of the ball. I'll get to their offense a little bit, but Jonathan Smith is an offensive head coach. He was the OC at Washington, and he hasn't been the play caller at Oregon State. Brian Lindgren does that, their OC. But the star on this coaching staff this season, I mean, Jonathan Smith deserves a lot of the credit because he, of course, made the in-house promotion to make Trent Bray the defensive coordinator. And I just got to say, in the interest of being fair, that he is not a nominee, which I don't believe he is, for the Broyles Award as the nation's top assistant. It's pretty ridiculous because Oregon State's defense a year ago was putrid, and now it's one of the best in the Pac-12. It's been really, really good. And I mean really good. Week in and week out, they've done a lot of really great things on that side of the ball. And Oregon State isn't recruiting at a high level. It's just scheme-based. Guys are really well coached. Their secondary is nasty. They haven't allowed more than 24 points in each of their last 5 games. Yeah. And Washington got to 24 points. They're the only one of the last 5 that got over that 20-point threshold. So they're not just good, they're playing with a lot of confidence right now. Only 2 teams have scored over 30 points on Oregon State this year. Fresno State in week 2, that was a 35-32 final, and then Utah in Salt Lake City put up 42. There was also a couple of defensive touchdowns in there, so I don't remember if it was 1 or 2. The defense might not actually have allowed 30 points in that game. Bottom line, that is the strength of this Oregon State team, especially when they're playing with their backup quarterback, which they will be again. Ben Gulbranson has done a solid job. He's been serviceable. He's nothing special. He's definitely a backup quarterback. He can make a throw here and there, but they will lean on their ground game. But I want to stick with the defense for a minute, just for people who haven't, watched a lot of Beaver football, which I imagine is probably a good number of you out there, Duck fans, which is okay. No shame in that. I don't expect you to be like me and whatnot. That's what I'm here for. They averaged 219 passing yards allowed per game. That's second in the conference only to Utah. Not a bad number. Just for reference, Oregon allows 278 passing yards a game. That is second to last only to Cal, who's just over 280. They allow 111 rushing yards a game, which is 1 yard fewer allowed per game than Oregon's defense has allowed this year. That held Tavion Thomas to, I think it was a pretty low number of 19 carries for 55 yards Tavion Thomas had last week. And the run defense, I think we all agree, it's been really good all season long. Oregon State has been in that same department. Now, the area where their run defense struggled the most, or the game, I should say, where they struggled the most was Utah. And a big feature of that was Cam Rising running the football. I have more confidence going up against Oregon State's front 7 than I do their secondary on the back end because their secondary is legit. I've watched them a lot this year. They're really good. They're really, really good. Washington probably would have scored more than 24 points, especially at home, had the winds not been blowing at, 30-ish miles per hour. That didn't help. But the Oregon State secondary, they can stay glued to receivers, and they're very, very well coached. And I think it's going to be a great test for guys like Troy Franklin, Dante Thornton, who's been playing great, Chris Hudson, and anybody else who can step up as well. I think the tight ends could be a mismatch in this game because I don't know if Oregon State quite has the athletes. Their safeties are a little bit more like corners than they are linebackers. I think there's a size mismatch there, but overall, those guys know how to cover. They know how to tackle. They are fast. They are well coached. They don't make a lot of mistakes. They do a lot of things really, really well. As a whole, their defense is allowing 20 points a game this year, which is 0.3 of a point higher than Utah. So basically second in the Pac-12 only to Washington State. And we know what Washington State is capable of. And the Beavs beat them here at Reser I think that was like the midway point in the season or so, 24-10. And we remember how our game with Washington State went up in Pullman. That is the fascinating thing about matchups, though, because you could very easily look at this game and say, well, Oregon State lost to Utah. We beat Utah, so we're going to be way better than Oregon State. Well, why are we only a 3-point favorite? It's like 3.5, 4, kind of hovering in that range. There's a reason, and the reason is that Oregon State is a really solid football team. Are they an amazing football team? No. They're not amazing because of what they have at the quarterback position, but they've been a really good home team. Last 2 years, their only home loss. They beat Utah at home a year ago. They very nearly beat USC this year, lost on a recreation of the Bush push on fourth down and a last second touchdown. They should have beaten the Trojans at home. Held USC to 17 points. That is the Trojans' lowest output of the year. I don't think it's an accident that it came in Reser Stadium. That's not a coincidence when you look at the way the Beavers defense has performed over the course of this 2022 campaign. But the quarterback is a position where they're limited. That's why they're not in that upper echelon. They're kind of right at the top of the second tier. Like you have the 5 teams at the top, Oregon and Utah and USC, UCLA, and I think you can put Washington up there after they hung with and ultimately beat Oregon a couple weeks ago. But then that next tier of teams, yeah, it's Oregon State, and they're knocking on the door. And if they had better quarterback play, they could very easily be 9-2 or even 10-1. I'm not kidding. I've watched them all season long. They could be in that area if they'd had better quarterback play. Branson at Washington threw for like 80 yards. He was terrible. Chance Nolan against USC, 4 interceptions. They weren't going to win the game against Utah. Nobody won a game in Salt Lake City this year because the Utes are a really good team and the Utes are really, really good at home. But 2 of their 3 losses, you can look straight to the quarterback position and say, boy, if you'd had a little more production there, they would have been a little bit better. Now, the good news for Oregon is that quarterback position still has that same limitation. And Ben Branson is not incompetent. It's not like he takes the field and he's just turning it over and the offense can't move the ball. No, but they are a run-heavy team led by the offensive line that I think does a really good job in the blocking scheme that they run. They look a lot like Utah. They are trying to be Utah. Defense first, run the football, a lot of play action, a lot of jet sweep motions, a lot of play action boots. They do a lot of the similar concepts, which I think is good news for Oregon, because when I look at Utah's personnel and I look at Oregon State's personnel, I say, yeah, Utah's got better personnel across the board. They've got a better quarterback. They're deeper on the outside, though it's probably a little bit comparable. I don't consider Dalton Kincaid an outside weapon. I'm just talking about the receivers there. But Dalton Kincaid's the best offensive player on either team. Damien Martinez, Oregon State's running back, is probably second. He's really, really good. And the Oregon State offensive line's probably a bit better. But overall, I look at the Utah offense and say they've been more consistent this year. They've been more productive. And I think they have better players across the board. And against that scheme, that philosophy of how to move the ball, score points, and win a football game, Oregon just had a lot of success against it. That gives me confidence in the defense if they're able to play just in a similar fashion to what they did a week ago, then I think they will be all right. But the offensive line is good. They're capable of giving Branson time, who, as we saw against Arizona State last week, is a little more mobile than you'd think. Not a feature of the offense, but he will scramble from time to time. It's not a DTR. It's not a Jaden Delora run around like that. It's a lot closer. It's not even a Cam Rising. It's a little bit more Michael Penix, where he'll move in the pocket to buy some time, and then every now and then you look and go, wow, that was like an 8 to 10 yard scramble on third down to move the chains. He did that a lot against Arizona State. I'm sure Lanning and Lupoy and the rest of the defensive staff noticed that, and hopefully they're instilling in the defensive line how you have to rush with some discipline there. But if you can get pressure on him, you can turn him over. He has been like Chance Nolan, who he was behind on the depth chart coming into the year and still is. Nolan just isn't healthy. He is a guy who will make a bad throw every now and then. He's got a good arm, but not a great arm. So he has to have a play well schemed, have a guy open, or you can make plays on balls that he delivers over the middle or down the field if you're in a good defensive position and you read it correctly. But their best player on offense is a true freshman, and he is a running back, and he is quite good. I have been most impressed. I will tell you about Damien Martinez after I tell you about Bet Online, your number one source for betting info, stats, news, and analysis. Get all the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there, from football to basketball to soccer and esports. We've got it all at betonline.net. And if you love sports podcasts, you can find those at BetOnline as well. We're always the easiest and fastest way to get your betting fix. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. So Damien Martinez is the guy that makes this offense go. And the Beavs at Washington a few weeks ago, they lost 24-21. They had a pick six. The offense had just 14 points. But on that opening drive, they ran right down the field. Right down the field. And that's one reason I have confidence in this game for the Ducks is because if you are forcing Ben Goldbranson to make a play on 3rd and 6 to 3rd and 10 consistently, you're doing something right. And Washington, after that opening drive, in which Martinez just ran it right down their throats, which Oregon did as well, because Washington has got some nice players in the front four, but after that, they struggle to tackle, as we know, ran for over 300 yards, so it's not the best run defense in the world, though statistically, I think their team rushing stats are a little bit misleading. If Oregon can contain Damien Martinez the way that we contained Tavion Thomas last week for Utah, who had 19 carries for 55 yards, yeah, that's about 2.5 yards a carry. If you do that this week, Oregon State will struggle to move the ball because fundamentally, everything their offense does effectively starts with the run game, especially with a backup quarterback. They are not a team that wants to line up on 2nd and 5 knowing we can't run the ball. We have to put it in the air here. They will call some screens from time to time. I think Oregon's done a great job adjusting it, defending screen passes as the year has gone on. That will definitely need to continue because they can hit some big ones. They also do a great job using their running backs in the screen game. So Noah Sewell, Justin Flo, Jeffrey Bossa have to be on high alert for that sort of stuff. Bennett Williams as well coming down into the box. No Luke Musgrave in this game. He's out for the year. He's their stud tight end. I think that frees up Bennett Williams a little bit to be more active in the running game and not have to be in man-to-man coverage against someone who, is a really good pass catcher like Dalton Kincaid. But Damien Martinez has gotten better and better. 2-time Pac-12 Freshman of the Week. He's really good. He makes good cuts. He is multiple. He is big. He's physical. He can make you miss in a one-on-one. He can run through you. He finishes runs well. I like what I see from him a lot. He fits their scheme really, really well with that pro-style zone blocking scheme. And I think that if Oregon takes that away, you really handicap what they can do offensively. Trayshawn Harrison, the Florida State transfer, is a solid wide receiver. He's had a case of the drops at times this year, but he's a good player. He's solid. Is he any better than Devon Vele? No, he's probably at that level, probably even a half step below. And I think Gonzo, for the most part, I mean, Vele got free for really just kind of one catch, and that was when Bennett Williams was guarding him in zone coverage. I think you can put Gonzo on him and really limit what he does. And then they have to go to other guys. And Silas Bolden is a good player. I think that's a matchup for Dante Manning. I think the other guy they have, I think it's Tyjon Lindsey is his name. Those two are in the similar mold, kind of slot guys, speed sweep guys on the edge who, can make plays if they get the ball in space. But it all starts with number 6. It really, really does. And if Oregon can key in on Damien Martinez and shut him down the way they did to Tavion Thomas, I don't know how Oregon State moves the ball consistently unless Ben Goldbranson has the game of his life. But this is also assuming that Oregon's defense shows up with whatever adjustments they made last week against Utah, and they play with that same sort of energy and that same sort of style. There was a lot more press man coverage. What do you know? Just saying. If they can come with that mentality and that approach, I think they can take away what Oregon State does well. The Beavers' offensive line is good, but that Oregon defensive line has to be playing with outrageous amount of confidence. Casey Rogers, Jordan Riley, Brandon Dorlus is just a force. I don't think there's any team in the Pac-12 that can block him consistently, except for Washington, apparently. He didn't do a whole heck of a lot in that particular game, but that's the biggest key. And if it feels like I'm harping in on it too hard, I don't think you can emphasize it enough. Oregon State has been able to run the football at least moderately well, but if you are limiting him to 2 and 3 yard gains on first down instead of 5 to 7 yards on first down consistently, you can be in a really good spot defensively. But that's the challenge that Oregon State presents. They're smart in their play calls. They're a well-coached football team. They've got a good offensive line, and Martinez is a good back. But you take that away, Oregon's defense would be in really, really good shape. Appreciate everyone listening. We'll be talking plenty more about the Beavs matchup as the week goes on. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and go Ducks.